period and to Thanksgiving, which is something to be very, very grateful for. Well, we have just started to be live, so we're going to go ahead and begin. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to see everyone again, sort of. We are here today, and I appreciate you moving up our meeting because I didn't anticipate you'd want to get together on Thanksgiving to talk about the next few weeks. So I appreciate you adjusting your schedules this morning. We'll keep it brief. The idea here today is to talk about what decisions that we can make at this point moving forward. As you know, we've been operating on a week-to-week basis, kind of looking at data and determining what our next course of action could or should be. And I have a little bit of data to share with you regarding the surveys that we put out, as well as where we stand right now in Lake County and in our zip code. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, so that we can start looking. Can everyone see that? Okay, so this is our elementary survey. And these are the two questions that were basically on the survey. And I know that some folks emailed and said that, yes, they were a little bit confused on how to answer, because I think some of our families are gathering with families that they've been gathering with this whole time. I have a group that's that way as well. For me, my next door neighbors and I have been close since the beginning of all this in March. But I only received 2 emails indicating that while they said yes, they're going to be gathering with folks that they've been gathering with the whole time. So I don't know how many other folks are out there like that. But this is our elementary survey. So over Thanksgiving, about 35% of our families will be gathering with folks outside their home. And then this is after winter break, or during winter break, about 37%, with 205 responses. And remember, folks were supposed to only respond 1 per family. And then for middle school, pretty similar, 36, 37% over Thanksgiving and about 40% over winter break. We do have a teacher survey out yet, but I don't have the results of that one. With 122 responses, 205, there might be some outstanding responses, but as I indicated on the survey, we would just assume that any outstanding responses would mean that those folks are gathering. And there was no intention with that other than to say what we would do instead of going out for another survey, because it'd be hard to manage that. We would just assume that the folks who didn't are probably gathering. Any questions on that or thoughts? Okay, let's take a look at where we are on our Lake County dashboard at this point. As you can see, this is kind of where, where we've been. We thought these numbers were kind of high, over 20, but obviously now we're way up here in Lake County at 75 cases per 100,000. And that is well over the threshold of 14. And it was over 14 when the county issued their recommendation to go virtual. In our zip code, we're following a similar trajectory. Again, here in this kind of area was where we weren't really being impacted that much. We were going above and below that, 14 threshold, and we were kind of seeing that up and down. And now we've definitely had this spike. We're following the same little bit of a dip here, but we're still at 41 cases per 100,000. And I would say anecdotally in the buildings, even this last 5 days, that we had very, very small groups in the building, less than 20 each day. We were definitely still feeling the impacts in terms of our staff and students still reporting. We were still getting reports of positive cases. And definitely having folks who needed to quarantine or, were close contacts that couldn't come into the building, in terms of our staff and teachers, teacher assistants and things like that. So we definitely felt the difference. You know, when we were kind of riding that wave, we were doing okay and feeling like, nope, we're still in good shape. But definitely once we hit that spike, we were feeling the impacts. So with that, I'd like to open up a couple things for discussion. The data doesn't look that different from the last time we made our decision. The question for me is, you know, how long should we call it for? You know, what should we be thinking about in terms of making a decision? Is week to week still appropriate at this point when the numbers are what they are, or should we look a little bit further out? I know our surrounding districts, Lake Forest, I think, has called it now out to the middle of January. There's a lot of districts who have just decided that at this point, given the fact that a lot of people are traveling, the numbers are what they are, people are gathering, that maybe it would be good for planning just to call it a little bit further out. So I'd love to hear perspectives on that, the pros and cons of kind of not going week to week for a little bit if we want to, or if we want to stay on that week to week trajectory. Would just love to hear some feedback on that. Or any comments about the data.
Lisa, just from a kind of a healthcare perspective, and I don't know logistically how this works from a completely educational standpoint, but considering numbers being what they're being and the reporting that we've got like a good 35-40% of families that are going to be outside their bubble for the holidays, it might be kind of nice to be able to build in a little quarantine period right after Thanksgiving. And then if you think it would be worth it, we could try coming back in person for that week before winter break as kind of a, let's give it a try. Come on back in, check in. But that would have given us 2 weeks after Thanksgiving to see if things settle. That 2-week quarantine period.
Yep. Any thoughts on that?
As a parent, I would say I would love to get the kids back in school, but the back and forth 1 week on, 1 week off is a little bit much. I think, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I would suggest through, you know, mid-January as well, just to get that quarantine and get the kids maybe guaranteed more than 1 week back in school at that point.
Thoughts on that?
It's Nicole. Sorry I'm not on video. I'm driving, but we'll be home soon.
We like your picture.
Oh, thank you. I don't know how that got there. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, I think I agree with Carrie. I do think when we communicate, and if that is the decision or whatever, that we have to respectfully ask people, though, to please not use that additional time to go elsewhere, or if they do, please observe the quarantine, or else we won't achieve the desired result and the effect of having those extra weeks, you know, at home. And I know that's obviously common sense, but I think that some people also might use that to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I did have some families reach out to me about the survey asking if they should fill it out, what if they're a fully remote family that doesn't plan on coming back. And initially my response was like, ooh, you know, we should have probably asked that. And then I double thought about it and thought, actually, I'm not sure it matters because of what Nicole's talking about. I think even if we have families who are remote, but they might be interacting in the community or outside, that still might affect the community numbers, which we're looking at, which would be our zip code. Does that make sense? So, and it was a great question. And initially I thought, oh, I should have done that. But then I thought, I'm not sure it would matter because our zip code is our zip code.
Right. And I'm even referring to the people who are not fully remote, who are hybrid or in, and just saying that, okay, if we say we're going to be out till mid-January, please, people, let's use that time to be at home and within our homes to get the quarantine effect in place when we do return to school.
Yeah. Completely makes sense. Other thoughts?
I would just second what Nicole said. That would be my only concern with announcing now that we're out for that length of time, that, you know, people would take advantage and not do the quarantine. So I think that if we do that, you know, we should just make it clear that, you know, I don't know if we can like make the call, like, you have to certify that you've been quarantined for 14 days before you come back into school. You know, I think somehow we need to make that clear.
Thanks, Vanessa.
I was going to add, just from the teacher perspective, about this yo-yoing back and forth. Teaching's like all about momentum and building momentum. And I feel like when we are disrupting the environment too frequently, it is hard for the kids to adjust, and adjusting to remote learning is hard enough. And then not having enough time to adjust to it, I think, kind of causes problems. Like, I, more than anyone, of course, would love to have the kids here and be able to look through their plexiglass and watch them make jumps on the number line, because it's been highly impossible over Zoom. But it is, to me, it's really challenging as a teacher to shift and kind of adjust all your practices to remote and make all these plans and then have them be going back and forth. I think it's hard for the kids too to kind of settle in. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, and I want to clarify for anybody too that's watching, you know, we do still use that remote platform in school. But I think the in-school folks, the teachers who are in school, have definitely adjusted certain practices, and then remote teachers have certain practices. So although we're all jumping off of that platform, Amanda's right, you do get into a groove regardless of which place you are, and then shifting that can be difficult. Other thoughts?
My thought is, I think that just for everyone's safety and peace of mind, and calling it through, January, so people can feel good about if they do want to see family, that's up to them, gives them a little bit extra time to do the quarantine. And if we're worried about people who aren't doing that, then I just think that we'll see it when we come back. And then if we may have to shift again, depending on, we see it, like you said, it impacts our staffing. I went to the dentist and now I'm quarantined. So, you just never know. So, I think we're worried about, we want to get back in, we'll get back in. We know how to do it. We've done it. I think now's a time for us to be extra cautious and safe and plan to do this well for through January. And then we'll plan on coming back. And then we're just going to have to see how it goes when we do come back. If we're seeing teachers who need to be home, kids who are, coming and they're sick, and we'll just have to do what we've been doing. That's just my thought.
Thanks, Michelle. I do want to reiterate too, that when we do come back, we have passed that trimester 2 deadline. So we will be incorporating more students and teachers into the building when we come back, because that's our promise to the community. And we are planning for that, and communication will be out shortly, if it isn't out already, about the adjustments that will be made when we come back to trimester 2. And I think that that's weighing heavy on my mind as well, that coming back in the middle of, tough numbers like this, with more folks in the building, I think is weighing for me a little bit heavy. Because like I said, even with a very small group, we've been having a hard time staying afloat right now in the buildings. So
I think that's a valid point to make, Lisa. And one of the things that I keep thinking about too is that we'll be adding students, and there is a learning curve that comes with that for those families. We experienced that when we started the school year, just making sure that everyone understood how the self-certification process works and how to take care of that every morning. Just for perspective's sake, here at the middle school, we're anticipating about an additional 25 students But we've also had an increase in the number of in-person kids who are whose families requested a move to hybrid. So we don't anticipate our classroom demand growing much, if at all, because the day-to-day in-person group will be very similar in numbers to what we're seeing now. But it's still an overall increase of about 25 kids.
And I think I would just add on and echo Mr. Blackmer's point, just about the impact that we're feeling is related to symptomatic students and staff members, and the sub pool is getting smaller, if not, as opposed to getting bigger at this time. So each day is a little bit of a task and a puzzle to put together. We are bringing back, we're adding in an additional 70 students. So about 70 more students will be joining us here at the elementary school. So I would say significantly more than middle. And in some ways, to Mrs. Sullivan's point, there could be like, all right, we'll do a week in, but I think that could be really tricky and complicated to bring in 70 more families during a time that feels the most sort of influx. And so happy to get the communication out. I'm going to be sending letters out today, I believe, to all of those additional families that are coming in to make them aware of the adjustments when we are ready to move forward. But I'm not sure that week is the ideal time to make that happen.
It's good feedback. So what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure what I'm hearing is we are not thinking, although Kathy, I appreciate your optimism and trying to get us back, because I can tell you right now, Kathy has been working probably harder now than she's ever worked as a school nurse, and also supporting our substitute nurse at elementary. And so, to hear that from you is pretty amazing. And I appreciate you suggesting that, but I'm hearing that back and forth might be tough. So I'm gathering that 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and winter break probably should be remote at this point to make sure we have the quarantine down, and also give people time to do what they need to do to prepare if they're going to see folks over the winter break. My question now kind of is going to shift a little bit to that decision about the 2 weeks after winter break. And the going back and forth in my head is the question about what does that do to psyche, and how does that affect or impact folks' actions or thoughts over this time period as well. So that's, I guess, I just want to revisit those 2 weeks at this point. Do we feel like we want to call the 2 weeks, or do we want to call it through winter break and take a look at the numbers now? And the only reason I go back and forth with that is a couple of points. One is, does that encourage folks to be a little bit more careful if there is an open window, a window of opportunity that we might be able to get back in right after winter break? Does it kind of offer some hope, or is it too tough and anxiety producing to not know? Is it harder to not know and just be in limbo after those, knowing that those 2 weeks we probably will need that quarantine period? But that's where I'm going back and forth, because I do know this is a really difficult time for parents and kids too. And I also don't want to put the community in a position where they're, where we kind of resign ourselves, to Nicole's point of just then I'm, maybe we just might as well do what we're going to do.
I wonder, I don't know how comfortable anyone would be with this idea, but I know that having a date and a target in mind so that families can be planning and preparing for that return, say we do push it 2 weeks after winter break and say this is our target for return. And if something were to happen and there be a dramatic improvement between now and then, it's, we're forecasting out what it might look like. If all of a sudden numbers have dropped dramatically and things are looking really good, to me, it's an easier decision to say, hey, let's bring them back a week earlier, given the current conditions, and everyone can celebrate that versus, okay, we're at the end of winter break and now we got to make a decision as to whether we continue to go further. It's semantics, I know, but it feels like
that's exactly what I'm trying to get at, is like which is better for for planning. And I think that's a point well taken. It's easier to say, okay, we're going to go back in because everything looks great, as opposed to saying, ugh, another 2 weeks. Yeah. I mean, that was what I was getting at. Any other opinions on that or thoughts?
I would just say that I agree with what Nate is saying. As a parent, it's nice to just have a target date. This is what we're working towards. If it ends up we could go in earlier, wonderful. But having a plan feels good, I think, coming out of winter break.
Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. The other piece of data that is interesting that I did not share just now, and since we have a couple minutes, and obviously anybody can jump in at any point. But for a while on the school's dashboard, there was a metric that was taken off because it didn't seem to be a big deal. So this is the incidence rate. This is the one we were talking about. This hospital admissions data has actually gone back up onto the school decision-making dashboard. And this was taken off for a while because it was really just hovering down here. And it just didn't seem to be relevant. But actually with the numbers as high as they are right now, they've added it back into our decision-making dashboard. And I think the reason for that is because hospitals are trying at this point to continue to obviously care for other things aside from COVID and continue to have elective surgery options or, care with other things. And they, the more cases that are impacting the hospitals, the less space they have to be able to do that. And I think that that's interesting to note that that's gone back up on the dashboard at this point because the numbers are so high right now.
Lisa, what about the testing turnaround? My son was exposed and we're still waiting for his test. And it's really frustrating. It's been 9 days.
Wow. I've heard anecdotally that the test turnaround time has gotten worse for sure. I also know that the community testing centers, the wait time to actually even just get a test has gone up. Paige, right now, that data on the dashboard indicates that it's still in a hybrid situation, still looking at a 3-day, but I don't know where that, let me look at the date on that last data point. It was updated November 7th. So my guess is if they were to update that data, it would not be at 3 days anymore, because that's what I'm hearing as well. And that's I'm glad you brought that up. That's part of what we're having with our staffing issues, is not necessarily that folks are actually sick, but they are waiting test results, or they are, a close contact, or that, those kinds of things are impacting us, and folks can work from home if we have work for them to do. But as long as we have kids in the building, any group of kids in the building, we have an in-person need. Then it's not just, we can't have remote work for everyone because we have folks in the building. So let's shift a little bit to that at-risk program with the 20, we have about 20 students in each building. I've talked a little bit with the principals over the course of last week about this program and our ability to keep going with that. I think we've been feeling like this is a program that we might have to go week to week with, but I don't know how folks are feeling, or how Nate and Kelly and Audrey and Joe are feeling right now about that.
Well, it's I think you can't go, it does have to be sort of week to week, because, we've had shifts in our own ability to cover those classes and have supervision there. People who had more or less volunteered and offered to do it. And when I say volunteered, I mean staff members that are coming in on their facilitated learning days to do that, and are then being having to quarantine. And so or they've got a sick family member. They can't do the self-certification. So staffing it has been challenging.
I would agree that staffing has been challenging, but completely worth it for any of the students that are able to be here. We had our pre-K students on Friday. Our pre-K students were in, and then we had only 5 additional students. And while there was a moment of defeat, I also had to pause with our staff that was here and celebrate. So because for those students that were able to make it in, they have a safe space, they have a good internet connection, we've got snacks and lunch, and they just have a really positive environment. So I do think that day to day, week to week, if we can keep this going, I am absolutely committed to it. I'm giving breaks. I'm sitting in classrooms with kids. And I also want to just acknowledge and give the most enormous shout out and extend gratitude to all of our teaching assistants and staff members that are here in the building to help support that. It does feel like a lot with all the things going on, but it's really quite an opportunity for our students. And I think it's been successful on that level. And also gratitude to all of the teachers that are remote from home and reliving all of those things, just taking a moment to just appreciate all of the faces on this screen, and for our staff members that are constantly adjusting and getting up each day and giving it their all. Appreciate each and every one of you for all of that.
I agree with Kelly on that, and I appreciate her putting that out there. It may also be worth just sort of mentioning kind of this small group and why we have it. We do have some students who, for a variety of reasons, are receiving special services, require a level of support that is not something we can provide remotely. And so it's just kind of worth mentioning that that's why we have the group that we have coming in. And it is extremely valuable and vital for them. So wanted to just put that out there. And yeah, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for mentioning how important and meaningful it is for those kids who we do have in person.
And for thanking our volunteer educators who have come in to be in the building. This is not an easy decision to make. And we thank everyone who's done that.
The last, if I may just add one more thing for the parents that have been sending students in that are part of that group, just the honesty to notify when there is a symptom, or if the family is engaging in connecting with family members. I just, that's important. And I'd like to be able to say, like, we'll run it with a few number of kids. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to send their child, and for those parents just to continue to be honest about what it is that they're engaging in and how their child is feeling, so that we can keep everyone here safe.
So to wrap up, here's what I'm hearing before I give one more shout out. Here's what I'm hearing for our announcement tomorrow, is that we feel comfortable at this point announcing it through January 18th, which is Martin Luther King Day. The 18th is a day off for us, so the first day back would be the 19th. But that we should emphasize, we'll be watching the numbers, and if we can get in sooner, we will make that call if we feel like we can, if it's safe. To try to, make sure that people know that we're watching, and we're not just going to wait until the 19th and no matter what, even if it looks good. Am I capturing it well? And that we should also emphasize that while we do have this break, and it's great, and people can connect with family members over the holidays if they so choose, we also would ask that the quarantine period between winter break and January 19th be observed as strictly as possible, so that we can actually get back and see our numbers go down in our community, hopefully to a stable place back where we were before, so that we can honor the requests of people wanting to come back in. That sounds all good. And if there is nothing else, then I do want to shout out to one person who's here, Jennifer. Marie, are you on the call still? Our sub nurse at elementary.
Yes.
So I have to say, when I started meeting with folks here in the spring, thinking about transitioning into Lake Bluff, one of the major things that kept me up at night was that our elementary nurse was expecting and was going to be out at some point, and we were going to have a substitute nurse coming in to be with us. And I cannot express enough just how tremendous Jennifer has been for us. And I talked about Kathy being a support, which she has been. Jennifer, though, has stepped up to the plate in a way that I am so incredibly grateful for. And we couldn't have done it without you. So Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you.
All of our healthcare workers right now, especially the ones in schools, just have tremendous respect and gratitude for you. And we're excited to have Kelly Doro. She'll be returning with us after winter break. So such an integral part of our school system always, but certainly during this time as well. If there's nothing else.
I did have one thing that I was thinking about. If we are pushing back our return day and we have that November 30th remote planning day to kind of be preparing to bring students in, should we put that back as a regular school day and then figure that out down the road?
That's a good question. We can certainly talk about that here if anyone has a thought. I know that when we initially thought about putting that planning day in, we were thinking that potentially teachers would need that time as well to prepare for an extended remote as well. A potential of gathering materials for us to do some professional development and just kind of get people situated for either coming back or an extended period of remote. But I'm open to talking about that for a couple minutes as well.
Just to add something that I'm not offering an opinion at this time because I don't want to do that first, but one thing that may inform your decision regarding input, we do have an institute day or an in-service day on Monday, January 4th, which would be the day that we come back or return from winter break. So just something to consider that day already is in the calendar as a non-attendance day, but for students, but staff would be available for learning or work.
Teachers, any other thoughts on that? I've been working on securing a couple of PD opportunities, but I think we could shift them if we needed.
Yeah, I think we definitely still need the 30th as a day, especially knowing that we're going to be there for 3 weeks to get as much hands-on activities for the kids as possible and books, and to have them really prepared for those 3 weeks to give them more of an authentic school experience and make sure they have everything they need. And so that parents are maybe doing 1 or 2 supply pickups rather than 3 for all those weeks, I think will be really helpful.
I think that unfortunately for middle school, I think this is one of those times and opportunities where it's probably needed more at the elementary level. Just like Erin said, just gathering supplies and for the little ones, but we kind of have to call it for the whole district. And so I just think that, like they said, they need the time to plan more for an extended remote period.
It was actually a question that we talked about at our team facilitator meeting last Thursday. That's the teacher leadership group here at the middle school. And it was fairly universal that those here felt we needed that time as well. There wasn't anyone saying, you know what, we should be bringing them back. So from the middle school perspective, at least from that informal conversation, I think we're all on the same page.
Okay. And I do want to say we're, in terms of the professional development, we're looking to provide some support for teachers in caring for kids' particular social emotional learning needs right now, and looking out for signs of trauma or anxiety as we go into this winter period and an extended period of completely remote with the community. So that's part of what we're doing. And we're also looking to provide some professional development for math and give teachers some more resources for that area as well. So, and some time, obviously, to be able to get materials and get things out to parents. So, okay, I appreciate the question though, Brian. Thanks for putting it on the table. Anyone else? As we head into Thanksgiving, I know it sounds really corny, but I am really thankful for this group. Always grateful for you guys showing up every time and giving honest feedback and helping me and our team make these really, really tough decisions right now. So I'm wishing everyone a great, happy, food-filled holiday. And I will be in touch about our next meeting. Thanks so much.
Happy Thanksgiving.